Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is redo and change in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, A Gift or a Curse. Ichigo simply stayed on his knees as he watched Aizen become completely ensnared within the seal Kisuk had implanted within him. Aizen continued his rant at the now stoic shopkeeper and was talking about something that Ichigo could only assume was the Soul King. As the seal trapped his arms again, Ichigo looked away. Aizen decided that he wasn't ready to accept his defeat just yet, and poured as much energy into the Hogyaku as he possibly could. The ground around him shook, and that was about it. Kisuk recognized that Aizen was trying to draw on the Hogyaku's power, only for it to openly reject him now. To both Kisuk's surprise and Aizen's last images before the seal took him whole, was the Hogyaku bursting from the seal and flying straight into Ichigo's chest, knocking the savior to the ground. "No!" Aizen shouted out as he was fully sealed now. Kisuk rushed over to Ichigo in a frantic motion to check on the boy. "Ichigo? Ichigo, are you alright?" He all but shouted as Ichigo laid on the ground unconscious. Before he could do anything else, Ichigo opened his eyes and looked at his mentor with wide eyes. Almost as if he were completely surprised what happened, but he also looked somewhat relieved. Almost like he accepted how things turned out now. "Ichigo, answer me right now," Kisuk demanded, a very fearful tone in his voice. "I'm fine, Kisuk." Ichigo started as he sat up. He placed his hand on his chest and felt the rush of power surging through him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before. The intense energy, the almost limitless pool of Ryotsu rushing into his reserves, and the amount of pressure he knew he had no choice but to hold back forever. "Are you sure?" Kisuk started with a very concerned tone to his voice. "I don't know what Aizen did to you, but whatever it was, you now possess the Hogyaku." "Yeah. Pretty sure I felt that, Kisuk." Ichigo groaned as he started to stand up. He looked over to Kisuk's worried face and was truly baffled that the usually calm or jovial man was now heavily worried like this. "I'm fine, Kisuk. Trust me. It's not that I don't trust you, Ichigo, I just don't trust that thing anymore," Kisuk said as he pointed to the Hogyaku. Ichigo grinned at the man and placed his hand on his mentor's shoulder. "Don't worry. I will never turn into what Aizen turned into." Kisuk smirked at the teen's reassurance and was about to say something else, until something truly unexpected happened. A Zanpakuto pierced through Ichigo's back and went straight through his chest. Kisuk stood there wide-eyed and jaw dropped at the sight in front of him. Ichigo couldn't tell what happened at first, until he felt the blade being slowly pulled out of him. Ichigo fell to the ground, and as he did, Kisuk was the first to see the one responsible for this and was truly at a loss for words when he saw that it was Rukia. "Rukia?" Kisuk started, still in shock at who he saw stabbed through Ichigo. "What the hell are you doing, Rukia? Why did you just attack your friend like that?" Kisuk was starting to truly lose his composure at seeing how cold Rukia was acting. She hadn't changed her blank expression not even once. Rukia didn't answer him and instead just turned and walked away. Before Kisuk could do anything, the rest of the Soul Reapers showed up that were able to. The ones among the confused and disturbed former captain were the head captain, Captains Anohana, Kiraku, Komamura, and Swaifo, and along with all of the lieutenants. Kisuk and Ichigo were surrounded by the mass group and noticed that everyone had a cold and almost emotionless look on their faces. Ichigo was down on the ground trying not to lose consciousness but having a hard time doing so. "Now that we know who has the Hogyaku this time," the head captain started in his usual authoritarian voice, "we shall snuff out any and all traces of its existence, starting with Kurosaki." Ichigo just risked his own life to end a war he had no reason to be a part of. Kisuk started while his frustrations only grew. He just proved that he deserves to live his life after sacrificing all of his power to stop Aizen. "It is not a matter of his part in this war, Urahara," the old captain bellowed out. "It is a matter of maintaining the balance of the world and ensuring that all threats be eliminated, no matter who it is." As he said those last words, everyone around the two started to prepare for another battle. Kisuk knew that there was no way to defeat everyone in his current state. Fighting Aizen earlier had drained him and he was still recovering as best as he could at the time he showed up to explain the seal on Aizen. Despite his current state, he picked himself up and prepared to defend Ichigo with his life if need be. He owed Ichigo that much after everything he's put the boy through. Ichigo heard everything the head captain said and had to know one thing from him before he died. With the last of his fading strength, Ichigo lifted his head off the ground and asked the old man. Was this all planned from the very beginning? When I got the combat pass. The old man looks at Ichigo and huffs before answering the boy. Yes. Every bit of this was planned to eliminate you from the moment Aizen revealed himself. We all waited for the perfect opportunity to dispatch of the both of you. This works for all of us and for the greater good. He drew his blade and charged it with its intense flames. He raised it high into the air and even Kisuk knew that there was no way he could match the head captain of the Soul Society even if he was at his fullest strength. Goodbye Ichigo Kurosaki. He swung his blade and the flames flew to the two, encasing them in its deadly flames. Is this really it? Ichigo thought to himself as he was being burned alive. Is this really how I die? Killed by the same people that I trusted, made friends with, and even bonded with. He continued to burn but the Hogyaku started glowing in his chest. This caught everyone's attention as they prepared themselves once again. I wish I could just change everything. Ichigo thought to himself again. I wish I could have prevent all of this from happening. Ichigo started to glow and become encased in the glowing energy. Before anyone around him could do anything to stop whatever was going on, there was a bright flash and the fire dispersed. It left Kisuk with heavy burns but he was still breathing. That wasn't what disturbed everyone though. What did disturb them was the fact that Ichigo was gone. Unknown location. Today was a bright and sunny day in a forest just outside of some village. There was really nothing out of the ordinary going on all throughout the day, until a young boy with brown hair and eyes started to walk along the forested area. He was wearing a Soul Reaper uniform and had a basic Azuashi in a blue sheath. He was walking around with an angered look on his face and seemed to be searching for something. I'll make them pay. He whispered to himself as he finally stopped and looked to the ground. I swear it. He started as tears fell from his eyes. I'll avenge you both. I swear. As the boy stood there and tried to stop his tears, a bright flash of light suddenly caught his attention. It was far off to his right and he could feel an intense spiritual pressure over in that direction. The boy was about to run away and alert his superiors, but he stopped when the pressure receded and he felt one singular being in its place. The boy looked back over in the direction of the source and started to feel a certain pull from the energy. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the energy felt different than anything he had ever felt. And yet it felt familiar and almost welcoming to him. Swallowing him, yet caressing his body gently. Forcing his soul to go almost blank, yet filling it with so much life and warmth. Against the boy's better judgment, he swallowed the lump in his throat and ran in the direction of this energy. He knew that eventually his superiors would sense that intense energy and send a captain to deal with it, so he had to move fast. Even though he was just a boy and fresh out of the academy, he had a proficient shunpo. The boy made it to where the source of the flash and energy originated from only to see a man with shoulder-length orange hair and a tattered shiakusho laying there. The man had something glowing in his chest that started to die down when the boy showed up. The man started to groan when the light was gone and tried to lift himself up. When the boy could see the man struggling, he decided to help him. Hey mister. The boy started as he ran toward the man. Are you alright? He stopped and helped the man to his knees. When the boy saw the man, he was surprised that this man looked more like a teenager than a man. Maybe it was the hair and the height. The teen took a deep breath several times, and when he finished, he looked at the boy with purple irises and black eyes. The boy was very intimidated by this teen's strange eyes, but something about him struck the boy as curious more than afraid. Are you okay? The boy started again with a nervous tone. Despite this teen not having a visible sword, he had a crazy amount of spirit energy. Yeah. The teen started in a groggy tone of voice. He grabbed at his head and tried to think of what happened. Clearly he should have died, yet here he was completely unscathed and still had the power he possessed before to defeat Aizen. How was he still alive? Why was he here in this field? How did he get there? Who's this kid that's helping him? That's when the teen remembered he was being helped up by the boy. He looked down to see the boy struggling to lift him up and mustered up his returning strength to stand on his own. The boy looked up at him and was surprised by his recovery. You must be powerful if you don't even need a healing Kido to get you back on your feet. The boy started again, only a little more relaxed. Who are you? The teen stretched himself out and popped the bones in his body. At first he was incredibly stiff from his initial wake, but now he was more loose and relaxed. He looked down at the boy and answered him with a smirk and pointing his thumb at himself. I'm Ichigo Kurosaki. He started in a calm tone. Ichigo lowered his hand and asked the boy. So what's your name, kid? The boy narrowed his eyes and looked away for a moment, almost as if he was skeptical for a moment. He sighed and decided to answer this Ichigo Kurosaki. My name is Sosuke. Sosuke Aizen. Chapter 2, Answers. Ichigo looked at the boy with wide eyes. He had just defeated Aizen not too long ago, so how is he suddenly standing here as a kid? This made absolutely no sense to the confused teen, and he knew it had something to do with the marble-sized jewel in his chest. Sosuke watched as Ichigo stared at him with his jaw dropped. He didn't know what he said, but this was definitely confusing to the boy. Are you alright, Kurosaki? Aizen asked him after a few awkward seconds. Ichigo shook his head to bring his senses back to himself and answered. Yeah, it's just that Ichigo was cut off when he felt two spirit energies approaching them. One felt like a low-level lieutenant while the other felt like a normal Soul Reaper. Aizen felt it too and turned his head in time to hear the buzzing of Shunpo appear in front of them. They were two regular Soul Reapers with one of them wearing an official teacher's badge on his shoulder. The man with the badge was an old man with white hair that was tied up. Sosuke. The old man started. Were you the one that did this? He motioned to the dense Ryotsu in the air. No. It was actually Dash. The moment Sosuke turned around, Ichigo was gone. There was absolutely no trace of him at all. How did he dash? I do not appreciate being lied to, Sosuke. The old man interrupted. Whoever was here must have left long before you showed up, boy. Now report what you saw back to Captain Hirako immediately. Sosuke was apprehensive at first, but sighed in defeat as walked past the two and flashed away from the whole scene. He was both frustrated and confused by this whole thing now. There was no way that Ichigo could have left the area without a single trace of spirit energy in the seconds that it took the two to show. It was impossible, was it? Before Sosuke could even think of it any further, he felt the familiar spirit energy right in front of him. He looked up and saw Ichigo standing there. Kurosaki. Sosuke stopped and looked at the man with confusion in his eyes. How did you get here so fast? Ichigo smirked at the boy and crossed his arms. I'm a lot faster than you think, Aizen. Sosuke looked at the man with even more confusion and asked him. Why did you leave before they could ask you any questions? Because I didn't want them to see me. Ichigo responded while turning to the side. He looked up to the sky as it was covered with the leaves of the trees around them. If this really was the past, then at least he wouldn't have to worry about Aizen trying to mess with his head every time he said a sentence. Meaning that he could pretty much talk to Aizen any way he wanted and get away with it completely. Kurosaki. Sosuke started. Ichigo looked over to him and waited for a question. Where did you come from and how did you get so much spirit energy? Ichigo could tell that Aizen wanted to know many things right now. He watched as the boy was trying to get as much information out as possible. Ichigo scoffed and looked away from the boy before answering with a vague answer. Where I come from isn't important anymore. How I got this much power is something that you'll never be able to learn without making powerful enemies in the process. Ichigo looked back to the boy and saw that he had his jaw slightly dropped. Tell me something, Aizen. Sosuke perked up at the statement. What squad are a part of and who's your captain? I'm part of Squad 5. Sosuke started. My captain is Shinji Hirako. Why do you need to know that, Kurosaki? Ichigo rolled his eyes and groaned. Listen, you can call me Ichigo, alright. And I'll call you Sosuke. Deal. Sosuke tilted his head a little at the sudden change from formal to informal greetings. He was always told to call a superior by a title name or their family name, but now to be told to call someone by their name was pretty jarring. Okay then, Ichigo. Sosuke hesitated. Why is my captain and squad so important? Just asking a basic question, geez. Ichigo said to him. Now that he really thought about it, he did need to know all of the captains if he was truly in the past. It would give him a sense of who he'd be up against in the future. Sosuke, I need to know every single captain right now. Sosuke was about question why, but the look on Ichigo's face told him that Ichigo was in dire need of this information. Sosuke sighed out, but decided to answer nonetheless. The captain of Squad 1 is Head Captain Yamamoto. Sosuke started. The head captain is still a formidable opponent no matter what time you're from. Squad 2's captain is Captain Yoriyuki Shihoin. Hearing that name made Ichigo perk up a bit at one of his old mentors being here. Sosuke continued with his list. Captain Rose Odoribashi is Squad 3's captain. Rose, huh? Another familiar face. Squad 4 has Captain Retsu Anohana. She is one of oldest and strongest captains without a doubt. She'll be a challenge. Squad 5 is my captain, Shinji Hirako. Shinji won't be too big of a problem this time. Captain Jinrei Kukaki of Squad 6. Someone related to Byakuya and that bitch Rukia. Captain Love Ikawa of Squad 7. Another one of the Vizards. Captain Shunsui Kiraku of Squad 8. Another of the 4 oldest and most powerful captains. Captain Kensei Maguruma of Squad 9. Kensei won't be too much of a problem, especially without his mask. Ishine Shiba is captain of Squad 10. The mention of his father brought up the last memory Ichigo had of him. He helped in making Ichigo the man he is right now. When he told Ichigo of his true name in the Danga, Ichigo vowed to right the wrong of the Shibas brought on by Aizen. Squad 11 has Kenpei Kigenjo as its captain. That was a brand new player in the game. Maybe this could give Ichigo an advantage in his endgame since the role of captain in Squad 11 passes with the killing of the previous captain. That, and he could gain the title of Kenpeiki in the process. Squad 12 has Captain Kiryu Hakaifun. Another new face? This one could be interesting, but Ichigo knew he would need Kisuke in the Department of Research and Development. Last is Squad 13's captain, Jushiro Yukitake. As much as Ichigo still didn't want to believe that this peaceful captain was involved in the betrayal back in the future, Ichigo couldn't take the chance. After hearing the current captains from Sosuke, Ichigo had to figure out some kind of way to destroy them for what they did to him in the future, or at the very least stop some future events from happening. He already had Sosuke Aizen right here and he had the complete Hogyaku. That's already one big problem down. Now all he needed was a way to get into the Siriti without being detected by a few individuals. Kisuke Urahara was number 1 on that list. Ichigo remembered asking Kisuke once when he invented the Hogyaku and remembered him say that he made the first half before he became a captain. If that's true, then he should be the only one who could possibly feel the Hogyaku's presence on Ichigo, and that meant the Ichigo would have to be very careful. Ichigo. Sosuke started, getting Ichigo's attention. Why did you need to know all of this? Are you planning something that involves them all? Smart, even when he was a kid. Maybe now was the best time to know just what his real reasoning for the Winter War was all about. Ichigo sighed and stretched himself out before sitting under a tree. Sosuke stood there and watched him with a hint of annoyance. So are you going to tell me or not, Ichigo? He yelled out when Ichigo started to cross his legs and close his eyes. Ichigo looked up at the boy and had an annoyed look on his face. Before I answer that, let me ask you one last question. Sosuke sighed in frustration but shrugged his shoulders. What? You want to know a lot about me so you can use my power later on to get some kind of revenge on the Soul Society, right? Ichigo said as he closed his eyes again. He heard Sosuke gasp and smirked at how accurate he was. So then Sosuke, he motioned his hand in front of him and Sosuke sat there. Tell me, why do you want this revenge? Sosuke sat there and started off at the teen for a while. He had just made his vow only a few minutes before Ichigo showed up. He had made up his mind then and there and knew that it would take a very long time for him to gain the power and strength necessary to get his revenge. But now, with this man sitting in front of him with his extraordinary power and curiosity for who every single captain was made Sosuke question just what to do. He was lost and knew it. He had craved for power ever since that day, but now instead of just power, he wanted something else to honor his vow. He wanted something that could truly help him achieve his revenge. He needed a mentor, and Ichigo seemed to be the one to do so for him. Taking a deep breath, Sosuke started his story. Before I joined the academy, before I knew just what my powers could do, I grew up with my parents. They were two of most gentle and peaceful beings in this world and cared for everyone, no matter if they were a soul reaper or even a snobbish noble. They were so innocent. Sosuke paused as he remembered just what happened that day. He took another breath and continued. One day, like every other day started, we were outside farming crops. It was sunny and peaceful that day. And then it went from peaceful to a bloodbath. These group of hollows attacked our village and murdered everyone there. My mother locked me in a secret cabin far away from the village and told me to stay quiet. I waited for 5 hours for her. 5 of the worst hours of my life. I was scared, terrified even. I couldn't find the courage to leave or the will to act, so I waited. And then I heard her scream. Ichigo could feel Sosuke's energy begin to waver and fluctuate at recalling the memory. He could feel how the memory made him feel like he was worthless and powerless, but that still doesn't explain why he wanted to destroy the Soul King. Sosuke wiped away the one tear that ran down his face and continued. Against my better judgment at the time, I found the strength to break the lock on the door and went to find her. But when I did, she was hanging by the neck from the mouth of a hollow. She had been dead before I even reached her along with everyone else. The hollows left as fast as they arrived and I was left there, holding what was left of my mother in my hands. That's when I found out about my spirit energy. It was Captain Hirako that found me after a few hours of me releasing energy uncontrollably, and he took me to the academy. I excelled in everything aside from Zanjutsu, and graduated within a year. It wasn't long after I graduated and joined Squad 5 did I find out about the attack on my village. It took some digging, but I found out that the Central 46 knew about the attack all along. That's why I vowed to destroy them for what they allowed to happen to my family. As Sosuke finished his story, Ichigo opened his eyes and looked at the boy with compassion on his face. He knew just how much this must have hurt Sosuke, considering the fact that he lost his mother to a hollow when he was a child. Even now with his centuries of life and experience to him in the future, he was just a boy who lost his mother to a hollow, just like Ichigo. Ichigo sighed and looked up to the sky again. I take it you really want to go through with this, do you, Sosuke? Sosuke looked at Ichigo with wide eyes and clenched both his teeth and hands into fists. He stood up and stood in front of Ichigo quickly before saying, "They let my family die for their own selfish reasons. They don't care about the weak and helpless out there in the Rukon districts, Ichigo. And they nearly damned me for being some trash that passed through the academy in a year." Ichigo was surprised by how fast Sosuke lost his composure, but continued to listen nonetheless. "If I had the power that you possess, then I could take my revenge right now." "And then what?" Ichigo asked him. Sosuke looked at him in confusion. "Say you do get power like mine, and say you do kill the Central 46. You will be running for the rest of your life from the Soul Reapers, and they will either kill you or put you in the Mukin for all eternity." Ichigo stood up and looked at Sosuke with a fire in his eyes that Sosuke had never seen in anyone's eyes before. "If that's all you're planning, then you should just give up right now. Charging in blindly can will get you killed or captured. How do you expect to face a captain-class Soul Reaper when you don't even know Zanjutsu? Or the fact that you don't even know what your Zanpakuto's name?" Sosuke didn't know what to say. He was at a total loss for words as Ichigo continued. "No. You're not ready to go and take your revenge yet. You'll need help with this if you really wish to change the spiritual world, Sosuke." Ichigo continued while placing a hand on his shoulder. "And I'm the guy who's gonna help you. Understood?" Sosuke nodded his head with some enthusiasm and was actually starting to figure out that he had finally found someone who he could truly look up to. Chapter 3, As Time Goes On. Co-Ocean. 50 years later. It was finally time for the true first steps to plotting his revenge. It took a long time and plenty of fake displays of power on Ichigo's side to get to this point. Even changing his last name so his father wouldn't eventually get suspicious. The part that still made Ichigo uncomfortable though, was the fact that he still looked the same as he did before. He stood there in his tattered like Soul Reaper uniform. There were plenty of scrapes and cuts over his time in Squad 11, but it was truly worth it to be here at this one particular moment. After beating practically everyone there was to beat in Squad 11, including Zaraki, Ichigo was now about to take his place as the new captain. He just had one last hurdle to leap over before he could start his plan in its entirety. Ichigo stood across the large training area surrounded by Squad 11 members, and the rest of the captains and lieutenants were standing near the far wall watching as well. Sosuke was standing next to Shinji. He looked different from his future self. Mainly his hair, which was now shoulder length on him and tied to his right side. For 50 years, Sosuke had been taught how to properly fight not only with his calculative mind, but also his Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suijutsu. Among the captains now, was Kisuke Urahara and his lieutenant Hiyori Saragaki. Ichigo stood across from the current captain of his squad, the large and dark-skinned man, Kenpei Kigenjo. He was very excited to fight this orange-haired teen who had clearly been the best swordsman in all of Squad 11's history. His power was unlike anything anybody else had ever seen before. Soko. Kigenjo started as he drew his Zanpakuto. The large man had a wild grin to his face and started to release his energy high into the air. The beam of energy shot into the air and surprised almost everyone. Ichigo wasn't impressed. "Are you ready to die by my hands, boy?" Ichigo stood there unfazed by Kigenjo's energy. He simply reached for his Zanpakuto on his left side and slowly pulled it out. It was always something when Ichigo brought out his blade to fight. Unlike most of everyone in Squad 11 who loved fighting with their Zanpakuto, Ichigo preferred his hands most of the time. When he did pull out his blade though, that was when he was being serious. Out of the decade that he'd been part of the squad, he's never lost a sword fight, ever. Ichigo's Zanpakuto wasn't like standard Zanpakutos. Instead of his being a normal-looking blade of some extent, Ichigo's blade was completely black and had a black handle with a red and black guard to it. Whenever people would ask him about his Zanpakuto, he would just keep saying that it's just how his power naturally flows within him. He was even summoned to a captain's meeting to discuss his strange blade once. 45 years ago. Ichigoko. The head captain started as he banged his cane on the ground to start this meeting. Ichigo was kneeling down in front of the room of captains and could finally get a better look at everyone there. The familiar faces were warm reliefs to see, and he could tell that despite the time he was in, they were all still very skilled fighters. The newer faces were strange though. The captains of Squads 6, 11, and 12 really stood out to Ichigo. Squad 6's captain was Byakuya's grandfather and head of the Kukaki clan at this point in time. He looked almost as old as the head captain actually. Squad 12's captain was a very large woman with purple hair. She had a smile on her face that would have made anyone question her, but Ichigo didn't even so much as bat an eye at her. Finally, Kenpei Kigenjo. He was a large man with dark skin and black hair on his head and face. He may look intimidating, but Ichigo could tell that he couldn't hold a candle to Kenpei Zaraki. "We have called you here to discuss your strange Zanpakuto," the head captain continued. "It is my understanding that you were able to learn your Zanpakuto's name in the academy, correct?" "That's right," Ichigo said in a bored tone. This didn't go unnoticed as both Shinji and Jinrei voiced their displeasure. "Don't think just because you've learned your Zanpakuto's name in the academy that it gives you the right to disrespect the head captain, young man," Jinrei said in a displeased. "Also don't see what's the point of this meeting if he's just gonna ignore others except a few." Shinji started, earning a look from Ichigo. Shinji smiled. "Don't think I haven't seen you hanging around my lieutenant, kid." Ichigo scowled at the blonde-haired captain. "That is enough from you two," the head captain bellowed. "Fall back in line, both of you. And you Ichigoko had better know where you stand right this instant. I will not tolerate insubordination within any of the squads you choose to be a part of." Ichigo simply nodded slowly, much to the head captain's annoyance. "Since you seem in no way appreciative of being within the presence of the 13 court guard," the head captain continued after a sigh of frustration at Ichigo's disrespect, "will you explain why your Zanpakuto is in a state of constant release and then join a squad?" Ichigo stood up and unsheathed his sword for everyone to see. He held it out horizontally to himself and then held it vertically so everyone could get a better look of it. It's not in a constant release. Ichigo started in a monotone voice. This is just how Zanjutsu always looks like in his sealed state. So you're saying you have Ishikai for that blade there, Ko? Kiraku asked as he tipped his head a little. I do. Ichigo said plainly before going to sheath his blade. Before he could fully do so, Yoriyuki thought to tease the boy a bit to get him to lighten up a little. So why don't you just show it to us then, Berry boy? She teased while she crossed her arms and smiled at him. Ichigo rolled his eyes at the request. Yoriyuki hadn't been much different than her future self. What a shocker. Ichigo looked to the head captain who nodded to Yoriyuki's request. Ichigo sighed and unsheathed his blade again. He held it to his side and whispered. Carve their hearts out, Zanjutsu. At first, nothing happened and everyone was wondering if the orange-haired boy was bluffing, but then his sword just disappeared out of thin air. Everyone looked at him in shock as Ichigo stood there for a few moments before he held both his arms out and two black okatanas appeared in his hands. They each had a chain on the bottom of the handle that stretched down to the floor and they each had red guards to them in a strange, cross-shaped pattern. Ichigo lowered his arms and looked back to Yoriyuki, who was actually very surprised his Shikai was something pretty intimidating. Satisfied? He asked her with a smirk. It was always a win to get one over on Yoriyuki. Ichigo brought both blades together and they merged back to his sealed blade. He sheathed it then pointed toward Kigenjo. I wanted to join Squad 11. Kigenjo had a mad grin on his face at the possibility of facing this boy one day. Present time. Ichigo stood his ground and wasn't intimidated by Kigenjo's rising spirit energy. It really wasn't anywhere close to Kenpei's in terms of raw power, and only made Ichigo feel slightly sorry that he would have to cut down a weak opponent. The head captain raised his hand to indicate that he was about to speak. Kigenjo lowered his energy to people could hear the head captain easily. This match will determine not only the captain of Squad 11, but the Kenpei of said squad as well. He pointed over to Ichigo with and continued. Ichigo-ko has challenged the current Kenpei, Captain Kigenjo, for his position. This battle will be contested to the death. Is that clear, Ko? Ichigo nodded but never once broke eye contact with Kigenjo. The two waited for the head captain to start the match for a short time. The old man raised his arm into the air and Kigenjo flared his spirit energy up once again. Ichigo still stood there unmoved as the head captain chopped his hand down. Begin. Kigenjo rushed over to Ichigo with his energy trailing right behind him. He raised his sword into the air and brought it down on the unmoved Ichigo. Right before Kigenjo was going to make contact with Ichigo, the orange-haired teen had moved forward so fast no one could even see just what he did. The next thing they saw was Kigenjo's energy dissipate and he was no longer wearing his captain's Haori. He stood there nearly petrified with his sword raised into the air still, while Ichigo was walking away from him with the Haori in his hand. He sheathed his blade and put the Haori on. He stopped in front of the captain's and that was when Kigenjo's body suddenly started spraying blood from hundreds of slashes all along his body. He dropped his broken sword and fell, lifeless, to the ground. Everyone was in absolute shock at what they had just saw. Ichigo glanced over to the now dead body of the former Kenpei inside. He turned away and proceeded to walk to the exit of the training ground, much to everyone's surprise. As he was walking, he caught a glimpse of Sosuke staring at him in absolute awe. Ichigo locked an eye on the lieutenant and smirked before walking along. Sosuke smirked at how easily his teacher had defeated the now former captain of Squad 11 without even really trying. Shinji caught his lieutenant smirking at the new captain of Squad 11 and didn't like what this could mean, not one bit. The whole crowd was silent as Ichigo proceeded to exit the arena, but that silence was broken by the head captain's cane banging the ground. Ichigo stopped and turned to the old man. It seems we have greatly underestimated you, Kenpei Ichigo. He said in a semi-surprised tone. I think I'd prefer Ichigo Kenpei-ko instead head captain. Ichigo said to him. Is there anything you need me to do, or can I go to my squad now? The head captain could tell that the newest Kenpei was going to be a true handful, so instead of ordering him right then and there, he just let the new Kenpei leave. When he left, there was almost an uproar at the swift end of the previous Squad 11 captain. Most were outraged that the new captain had so effortlessly defeated the former captain, but then there were a few that actually liked the way he handled that. Those individuals were the ones that left to follow their new captain. Ichigo was walking along, trying to get used to the size of this captain's Haori. He would have to get it shrunk so it could fit him properly. Big bastard really stretched the shit out of this thing. Ichigo whispered to himself as he had to constantly roll up the back so he could walk without his coat impeding his movements. "Hey Captain!" A familiar voice interrupted him and Ichigo turned to see Zaraki, Yumi Chika, and Ikeko standing in front of him. Yachiro was on Zaraki's shoulder and she was smiling to her new captain. "What is it you four want right now?" Ichigo asked them in his usual monotone voice. "For one, to congratulate our newest captain for a very exquisite killing," Yumi Chika said while flipping his hair a little in a feminine way. "And to get a good chance to fight you sometime in the not-too-distant future," Zaraki said with a deadly grin. Ichigo couldn't help but feel relieved to face down Zaraki, especially now that he had a true killer instinct in him now. Ichigo grinned at the man and said to him, "I can tell you'll be a hell of a lot more fun to fight than that trash that's still laying in the grounds." Zaraki's grin grew at the challenge his new captain had just set for him. Ichigo turned away from them and proceeded to head back to his new room to rest for now. 3 hours later, Ichigo had finally woken up from his nap and stretched himself out. The moment his feet touched the ground, he closed his eyes and searched for Sosuke's energy and found him wandering in the forest. He also saw another familiar energy next to Sosuke in the form of Jin Ichimaru. Ichigo opened his eyes and smirked. Sosuke was probably getting ready to train with Jin so he could become just as fast as Ichigo was. Ichigo started to remember the first times he had trained Sosuke how to fight and the first time they met Jin. All those years ago. 40 years ago. Sosuke was being pushed back hard onto the hard ground by his teacher. He skidded on the ground a few times before catching himself and narrowly avoiding a devastating slash by Ichigo. "Good." Ichigo started as he placed his blade on his shoulder. He looked over to Sosuke, who was panting heavily and covered with scratches, and grinned when he stood back up quickly. "Your reaction time is getting better every time we clash. A few more years of practicing and you'll be able to defeat nearly anyone in a one-on-one fight." "I don't fully understand your fighting style, Ichigo." Sosuke started in between huffs and held onto his Kyoka Suijutsu tightly. He looked at his free hand and clenched it into a fist. "But I can feel myself getting stronger each and every single day. Even Kyoka is getting stronger." Ichigo grinned at how progress was going. After training from Kisuke, Yoriyuki, Shinji and the Wizards, and both Zanjutsu and Tensei Zanjutsu, Ichigo had become very proficient in combat. Now he was training Sosuke in their various arts and fighting styles. Sosuke was a fast learner. Since he was here in the past, he knew that everyone he has ever fought won't be anywhere close to the level of power and strength they were in his time. And with Sosuke's help, he would be able to take down the Soul Society with ease. Sosuke sheathed his blade and made his way over to a log to rest when he noticed something silver in the bushes. When he did, the figure scurried away. Sosuke turned to inform Ichigo, but saw that all Ichigo did was point in that direction. "That kid, bring him here," Ichigo said to him. Sosuke nodded and flashed away. Jin Ichimaru was running away to inform his captain, Shinji. He was completely shocked to find out that the lieutenant of the squad he joined was training from the stranger who showed everyone complete disrespect. He knew of Ichigoko, same as everyone else had, as a cold and isolated individual who was very strong. To see him so friendly and training Squad 5's lieutenant was something he needed to report on. Before he could get anywhere else though, Sosuke flashed in front of him, Zanpakuto in hand. Jin stopped and could see the coldness in Sosuke's eyes. What had that Ichigoko done to him? "Why were you spying on us, Jin?" Sosuke asked as he pointed his sword at the third seat. Jin smirked at him, shrugged to hide the fact that he was very worried how strong the lieutenant was. "I guess I just like to eavesdrop. But let's face it, Sosuke," he unsheathed his sword. "Yeah, we're never the best swordsmen in the squad, so I think I can see why ya would take training from that orange-haired weirdo. That orange-haired weirdo has been training me to fight with my sword, Jin," Sosuke said with a smirk. You won't be able to hold a candle to me this time. Oh. Jin said as he flashed in front of Aizen and started a flurry of strikes. Sosuke blocked them all with very little effort and Jin noticed. He jumped back and decided to try and end this before he would get in over his own head. Shoot to kill, Shinso. Jin said as his blade glowed white and went straight at Sosuke at great speeds. Jin expected Sosuke to dodge out of the way or at the very least try and block it, but he was beyond shocked when Ichigo suddenly appeared in front of Sosuke and caught the blade mere inches from his face. Jin opened his eyes and was completely shocked at what he just saw. His Shinso was caught by a mere Soul Reaper. His shock was short-lived when his blade was tossed aside. Jin looked over to his Shinso then looked forward to see the tall orange-haired Reaper towering over him. I guess I could use you too. Ichigo said with a calm smirk on his face. Jin didn't know what just happened, but for some strange reason he wanted to learn from this man. He wanted to know just how to get stronger if Sosuke was able to do so. If he could get stronger, then he could always be there to protect Rangiku. Present time. Ichigo had flashed over to the two and saw them training with their respective weapons, but something felt different about their Zanpakutos. They felt different than before in Ichigo's time, and they felt very different from their previous training session. They felt almost like they were completely different weapons now, and Ichigo could tell, this was going to be fun. Chapter 4, Unsettled Stealth Captain. A wave of strange energy could be felt from the two as they continued to clash swords with one another, completely oblivious to it. The energy was strange at first to Ichigo, but he suddenly realized that it wasn't just their Zanpakutos that felt different, it was the two Reapers wielding them that had changed. Ichigo took a good look at how they were sparring against each other and could see the difference in this time than the future he was from. Ichigo watched them clash again and again and noticed the difference from his future. In his future, Kyoka Suijutsu was filled with absolute loneliness and despair, same as Sosuke had when he was the way he was in Ichigo's time. He felt an emptiness that he felt couldn't be filled by anyone or anything, so his Zanpakuto felt the same thing. Sosuke was the epitome of lonely. Now, Sosuke had something that made that despair fade away completely. A purpose that he knew could only be accomplished by sticking with the very man that had saved him from his loneliness and has given him a new look on how the world should be rather than the way it was. Back in the future, when Ichigo fought Jin, he could faintly tell that his Zanpakuto, Shinso, was filled with hate and revenge same as its wielder. Jin wanted nothing more than to kill Sosuke for what he had done to Rangiku at the time and felt that the only way to do that was to stick by him at all times. That plan backfired on him though when Aizen said he knew of Jin's betrayal the entire time. Now that Sosuke hadn't even attempted to form the Hogyaku, Rangiku was safe and this drove Jin to being her protector rather than her betrayer. His blade showed the will to act and protect the one thing most precious to its master, and Ichigo couldn't help but grin at that declaration. Ichigo continued to watch them clash until he finally decided to make his presence known. He flashed down and watched them turn towards him in near-shocked expressions. They had grown used to having their teacher suddenly appearing out of nowhere completely undetected. I see you two have been getting in a lot of practice. Ichigo started as he folded his arms and continued to grin at the two. After what you did earlier to the former Kenpeki, Sosuke started with a smirk on his face and enthusiasm in his voice. That just shows that we need to train harder than ever to even reach a level on PAR with you. Though I kinda doubt that we'll ever be truly on PAR with you, Captain. Jin raised his hands and put air quotes on Captain. You'd be surprised at how powerful you can become when you're pushed the right way. Ichigo said to them, remembering how he was trained in near-death ways. Well, with all due respect, Ichigo. Sosuke started while he sheathed his blade and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Who exactly trained you on how to fight? I'm pretty sure almost nobody was even able to see how you cut the former Kenpeki apart. Ichigo smirked at him and started to remember how he was trained by Yoriuki in his time. She helped him with his speed and his Bankai so he could move almost as fast as her. The way he is now, he could easily outrace her with no problem. Wanting to test that theory and knowing that said stealth captain had been a little too interested in him these recent years, Ichigo decided to pay her a visit sometime later. He looked over to Sosuke and Jin and answered them. A friend of mine you two will probably never meet. Ichigo stated as he stretched his arms up. I'm gonna head back to my squad to see about how to make this Haori smaller. You two get back to your own squad and go about your day. Understand? He was met with nods from both of them and he flashed away. As Ichigo flashed down a street not far from his squad, he could feel the faint spirit energy of a certain Squad 2 Stealth Force member watching him. He stopped and sighed as he turned around to a tree and met the grayish eyes of his future Squad 2 captain, Swyfon. He scowled at her, causing her to grow fearful and fall out of the tree. Before she hit the ground, Ichigo caught her with one hand and held her up by the back of her collar. He looked at her with his scowl and could see how afraid she was. This Swyfon was completely different than the Swyfon back in his future. She was almost timid-like now and looked very inexperienced in hiding her energy properly. Either that, or Ichigo was just that good at detecting even the faintest of spirit energies now. "There a reason you're spying on me, girl?" Ichigo asked her in his monotone voice with just a hint of irritation to get his point across that he was pissed off at her. Swyfon quickly answered with a bow, and frantically said, "I'm sorry, Captain Ko. I'm so sorry. My captain just wanted me to spy on you. Please don't kill her." Ichigo was taken aback a little at hearing her beg him not to kill Yoriyuki and not herself. Then again, she worshipped Yoriyuki like a goddess, so it really shouldn't surprise him that much. With a sigh of frustration that caught her attention, Ichigo dropped her and she fell on her rear from the height. Swyfon looked straight up at him and expected her life to end right then and there, but then she saw something from the cold captain she didn't expect. He offered his hand to help her up. Swyfon looked at his hand then back to see his scowl gone and replaced with a stern look that sent a shiver through her body. With shaky hands, Swyfon reached up and grabbed his hand. He squeezed hers enough to hold her but not hard enough to bruise as he pulled her up. Ichigo let her hand go and crossed his arms. "You tell your captain that if she wants to talk to me or want to know me in some way, then all she needs to do is find me," Ichigo said with a stern tone. Swyfon nodded to him and bowed her head in respect. Before she could even raise her head and turn to run away from him, she felt his hand on top of her head. His strong grip holding her in place. She started to get scared again at what he could possibly be thinking of right now. "What's your name, girl?" Ichigo asked her. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Swyfon answered without sounding too terrified. "Swyfon, sir." She felt his hand leave her head and she looked back up to him. Swyfon could see something in his eyes. A look not of someone like the past Kenpakas that only craved battle and bloodshed. She saw genuine compassion and reasoning despite it being put into a monotone stare. "I'll be keeping my eye on you, Swyfon," he said to her, gaining a gasp of surprise from the girl. "Learn how to truly hide your spirit energy so I can't easily find you. I also want you to get stronger, so someone like the former Kenpaka seems like child's play to you." Swyfon opened her mouth to speak, but was finding it hard to form the proper words. After a few failed attempts to speak, she shook her head and asked him, "Why do you want me to get stronger, sir?" Ichigo raised an eyebrow to her question. "Simple. Because I can see that you're strong, Swyfon. Give yourself a few more decades or even a century, and you may even rival or even surpass your own captain." With those words, Ichigo walked away from her to his squad barracks. He could tell that Swyfon was still standing there pondering just what he said to her. As he walked away from her knowing that he's potentially gained another ally, Ichigo smirked to himself. A few weeks later. Ichigo was noticeably bored in the captain's meeting today. Ever since he became captain of Squad 11 he's been summoned to many meetings in these past few weeks. 20 in total, all about a recent increase in hollow sightings around the Rukon districts. This meeting was no different than the previous ones, but this particular hollow sighting had caught Ichigo's full attention. There's been a strange sighting of a mysterious type of hollow that clings onto a soul and slowly takes control of the body. Kisuke started. "We've found out that even if we were to kill the host, the hollow would simply just jump to another body completely undetectable to any of us." Kisuke was good at hiding his frustration from everyone in the room, but Ichigo could tell this was starting to frustrate him. Yoriyuki could also tell her best friend was putting on a facade for the other captains, and it worried her. "Have there been any success tracking who might be possessed by this hollow, Captain Urahara?" Ichigo asked, surprising everyone in the room. Usually, The new Kenpeki only spoke when he was spoken to and never bothered asking any questions other than when the meeting was over. Ichigo may have kept his gaze solely on Kisuk, but he could tell everyone was staring at him and wondering just why this hollow interested him. Kisuk was hesitant to answer, but relented, and did so. So far, all we know is that it appears somewhere in between the 70th and 79th Rukon districts. Kisuk started with a hint of curiosity in his voice. He had been trying to figure out who Ichigo was ever since he first laid eyes on the boy when he first showed his blade to them. Something like that still puzzled him even to this day. "May I ask just why this concerns you, Captain Ko?" Anohana asked him with her usual tone. Ichigo looked to her and the room felt colder all of a sudden. The current and first Kenpeki stared each other down for a few uninterrupted seconds before Ichigo broke the rising tension. "If one hollow's worrying everyone so damn badly, then I'll kill it myself," he said to her in his usual monotone voice. "Ah, you do care, Captain Ko," Kiraka said as he tipped his hat and smirked at the orange-haired teen. Ichigo didn't really respond to him and brought his attention back on Kisuk. Kisuk was unsure if he should really answer the boy or not. He was more cautious of the new Kenpeki than he would really let on, but at the same time his curiosity as a scientist got the better of him. He wanted to know just how this boy would handle things if he was given the chance. "Well, if you truly wish to do so yourself, Captain Ko, then I guess I'll accompany you," Kisuk started in his usual jovial tone. "That won't be necessary, Captain Urahara," the head captain spoke, getting everyone's attention. "If Captain Ko wishes to destroy this hollow himself, then he may do so. But he will be accompanied by Captain Shihoin of Squad 2 for assistance," the head captain continued as Yoriyuki stood there and stared jaw-dropped. "You two may bring anyone from your squad with you to deal with this hollow, and you may leave after this meeting. This meeting is finished." The head captain banged his cane on the ground and the room cleared. Yoriyuki was still a little shook up about being paired with the new and pretty intimidating captain that seemed very distant than previous Kenpekis. Even Kiganjo wasn't this cold before and he was very battle-crazy. As she walked outside along with Kisuk, she felt a hard tap on her right shoulder and turned to see Ichigo staring down at her. She stared for a few seconds dumbstruck by his sudden appearance, much to Kisuk's surprise, before answering him. "There's something you want?" she asked, masking her nervousness to how imposing he was. "Just wanted to let you know that I'm not bringing anyone from my squad with me," Ichigo said to her in his usual voice. "And I was wondering who you were bringing with you before you flashed off and I'd have to work a bit to catch you." Yoriyuki scoffed at how he basically said he could catch her no problem. This irked her. The fact that whenever she would attempt to tease him or try to make him uncomfortable as she's done with every other captain so far, he would pay her antics no attention and actually give her the cold shoulder for the most part. That made her frustrated, but now to be told that he could catch her easily was the last straw. She decided to test the teen's reflexes with a swift and sudden fist to his jaw, only for him to dodge it with flash step and appear behind her. This surprised both of them. Kisuk because even he had never seen anyone truly outmaneuver his best friend, and Yoriyuki for not being able to even see how he dodged her so easily. "If you're done trying to hit me," Ichigo started as he placed his hand on her shoulder, sending a chill all throughout her body. "I would like for you to bring that girl Swafon with you." "What?" she yelled out and turned to look the captain in his eyes. "How do you know who Swafon is? And why do you want her to come with us?" Yoriyuki was very uncomfortable with the way Ichigo had all but ordered her to bring Swafon with her, but then a sudden thought popped into her mind. "Were you the one that told her to get stronger?" she said in an almost angered tone. "Yes, I did," Ichigo said nonchalantly as he crossed his arms. "I told her to get stronger, and now I want to see how strong she's gotten." "Is that a problem, Yoriyuki?" She was about to speak out but something just didn't feel right about all of this. Ever since Swafon came back that day a few weeks ago and told her what happened, Swafon had been training like a madwoman. She had gotten truly stronger, that was for certain, but was it all just because she had a pep talk from the man she was assigned to spy on? Yoriyuki sighed and turned away from him in the direction of her squad barracks. "I'll go and get my third seat and wait for you near the 70th Rukon district. Try not to make us women wait for you." Before she could leave, Ichigo spoke up. Try to keep up then after I get there. His words irked her again and she disappeared in a flash. Ichigo could tell he got to her and smirked. After all the times he's been teased by her in his future, this was some good old-fashioned payback. Kisuke noticed the smirk on Ichigo's face and grinned. Well, I guess you can do more than just scowl, Ichigo. He said in his jovial tone. Ichigo looked over to him and went back to his usual look. And just like that, it's gone. You're a very interesting individual, Ichigo, you know that. I never noticed. Ichigo started as he crossed his arms. Don't you even think of spying on me like Yoriyuki tried to do, Kisuke. If you want to know me, then all you have to do is ask. The words confused the scientific captain as Ichigo started to walk off to go on his mission. As the head of Orange Hair was leaving, the captain of Squad 10 showed up next to Kisuke. So, he started, getting Kisuke's attention. What do you think? Kisuke looked at his friend then looked back to the direction Ichigo went to inside. I honestly couldn't tell you, Hine. He started with another sigh. I honestly just can't figure this one out at all. Then I guess it's time for a little Shiba intervention. Hine said with a smirk that caught Kisuke's attention. When Kisuke saw that look, he instantly knew what that meant and kinda felt a little sorry for Ichigo now that he was going to be a part of a Shiba party. Chapter 5, Chibi Hollow, LOL. Ichigo wasted no time heading to the gate to leave the Sirei. He flashed over to where the 70th Rukon district was and sure enough saw Yoriyuki and Swaifon standing around. Or more like Swaifon standing around and practicing her sword techniques while Yoriyuki was noticeably sulking on a tree. She looked visibly frustrated, most likely from the way that Ichigo had talked to her earlier. Ichigo could see it in her body language, she was thinking about what he had said to her, and it was getting to her badly. With a smirk on his face, Ichigo flashed down to the two and shocked Swaifon, causing her to fall to the ground. I truly do hope that that isn't going to happen when we find and kill this hollow, Swaifon. Ichigo said to her while offering her a hand. He still had on his stern look that she was used to, but Swaifon could tell that he genuinely wanted to see her succeed. Swaifon took his hand and was pulled up. She looked Ichigo in the eyes for a split second before looking down in embarrassment. Yoriyuki noticed her small blush and chuckled lightly under her breath. She stood up straight and went over to her squad member. About time you showed up, Captain. Yoriyuki said while crossing her arms. She started walking away toward one of the districts followed by Swaifon. You come in or not? Ichigo huffed and walked along after them. They went over to the first district and searched for a while before moving on. To Ichigo, this was a waste of time, seeing as though he already knew where this hollow should be by now. They searched a few of the other districts before Ichigo became frustrated and made a declaration right then and there. All right, I've had enough of this. He said as he went off from the two confused women. I'm gonna look for this thing in a different district. It's faster this way. Yoriyuki tried to protest against this but was too late. Ichigo flashed away from the two faster than she could track and left her seething to an extent. Swaifon had never seen her captain like this before. It was a little nerve-wracking to see her frustrated for once and taking someone truly seriously. While the two were standing there for a few seconds, Ichigo had already made his way to the district he remembered Rukia telling him about. He flashed a little was off and saw the sight in front of him. He saw her after all this time, he saw Rukia. She was being attacked by a large man that was clearly possessed by the hollow in question and he could also see those two kids from before. They were cowering behind Rukia while she had fired a Kido at the man. He was down and Rukia thought she had defeated him. Stupid girl. She went back to the two and knelt down in front of them. Ichigo couldn't tell what they were saying, but he saw the two kids hugging Rukia and instantly remembered his own two sisters. Despite being in the past and being an all-around cold person to others besides Sosuke and Jin, deep down he truly missed his sisters. The man stood back up and slowly approached the three. He grabbed Rukia from the back of the neck and the kids screamed, knocking Ichigo back to reality. Rukia. Ichigo saw the man turn Rukia around to face him and a hollow-like entity had tried to force itself into Rukia. As much as Ichigo would have loved to see Rukia suffer, he had other ideas for this hollow. He flashed over to them all to their surprise and grabbed the man's arm holding Rukia. He squeezed a bit and the man's arm completely shattered. He dropped Rukia and screamed in pain. The entity started to circle around the man and it didn't look all too happy. It was interrupted. "You will regret that, Soul Reaper," it yelled in a deep and distorted tone. Ichigo was completely unfazed by the Hollow's outburst. He was able to defeat it when he was younger and less experienced, now it would seem heavily unfair to go even half force on it. He turned to the three and saw the two kids consoling Rukia. "Rukia, are you okay?" the girl asked her. "Please be okay, Rukia," the boy begged as he started to cry. "I'm okay, you too," Rukia said in between breaths. She looked up at the Soul Reaper who saved her and noticed the white Haori with an 11 on it. She went wide-eyed as she realized that this was a captain of the 13 Court Guard squad. Ichigo noticed her look of surprise and huffed. He turned around and faced the Hollow. "If you don't want to die today, then I suggest you three run and don't come back here," he said in his monotone voice. Rukia nodded and scooped the two up before running away from the incoming slaughter. She could just feel the killing intent coming from this captain and didn't like it at all. Ichigo watched them leave for a brief moment before looking back to the Hollow. He crossed his arms and knew that there wasn't a single thing this Hollow could do to harm him. The Hollow took his bored stance and expression as a challenge and rushed over to him with the man's Zanpakuto in his still functioning arm. "Don't take my power lightly, you bastard," the Hollow yelled before it leapt into the air and went for a forward slash. Ichigo didn't even move as the blade came into contact with him and shattered. "What?" the Hollow yelled out before Ichigo grabbed the man by the throat. The Hollow felt a strange power going into the man and flowing into it. "What are you doing to me?" it asked Ichigo. Ichigo didn't bother answering as the Hogyaka glowed in his chest. He smirked and released the energy into the Hollow and watched as the body fell to the ground, lifeless. In his hand now, was the Hollow in its snake-like form and flailing around in the captain's iron grip. Ichigo grinned at the Hollow and it could feel an almost sadistic-like aura resonating from Ichigo's glare at it. The Hollow stopped flailing and just hoped that it would at least be quick and painless. It shut its eyes and waited for some kind of final blow of some sorts, but it never came. It opened its eyes again and saw that the captain's eyes were glowing a purple color. "What the hell?" the Hollow thought to itself before it felt that same energy going into it and it could feel its body changing on it. The Hollow could feel the intense energy and felt itself start to grow in the captain's grip. The once small snake-like Hollow with a scythe for a tail had now grown into a small child with a snake mask, pale skin, red hair, and a snake's body for legs with the red scythe for a tail. Ichigo dropped the boy and could sense that Yoryuki and Swaifon were on their way to check out the spirit energy that he released. Luckily for him, it was spirit energy that nobody has ever felt before aside from possibly Kisuke. "Well then," Ichigo said as he opened a Gargantat in front of the now childlike Hollow. The boy was definitely terrified of the Soul Reaper that had just given him power. Why though? The boy felt like a Vastolord-class Hollow now. Ichigo pointed to the Gargantat after drawing his own sword. "There's two ways this can happen. Either you leave to Hueco Mundo and become stronger the next time I find you. Or I can just kill you now and that be the end of it. Your call, kid." The boy was looking from both the Gargantat then back to the captain. He swallowed the lump in his throat and scurried into the Gargantat quickly before Ichigo closed it. "Smart move, kid," Ichigo thought to himself. He sheathed his blade right when Yoryuki and Swaifon showed up, swords drawn and ready. "You two just missed it," Ichigo said to them. "What happened here, Captain Ko?" Yoryuki asked him while sheathing her blade. Swaifon followed suit. "Nasty little thing, I'll give it that," Ichigo said to her, obviously lying to her. In his time, he was a terrible liar, but here, he was pretty damn good at it. "Had to kill the host first before I could cut down the Hollow. It faded away with that energy when I did that." He started to walk away from the two only to be stopped when Yoryuki flashed in front of him. "Where do you think you're going?" she said as she placed a hand on his chest. She went from very irritated to a little surprised when she felt how muscular Ichigo was through his uniform. She shook her head to clear it and took her hand off. "We'll need to report this to the head captain. I've never felt any energy like that one before." Ichigo smirked at her and walked to her side and leaned down so he was right next to her ear and whispered. "And when was the last time you ever reported something, Yoriyuki?" She shivered from his voice and turned only to see that he wasn't there anymore. "Sorry I couldn't get you to see any action Swyfon," Ichigo said as he appeared away from the two. He still had his back turned, but Swyfon could tell that he was actually sorry. "Next time Captain Ko," Swyfon said in a determined tone. The two may not have been able to see his face, but Ichigo was actually smiling. He flashed away and was making his way back to his squad. Just as Ichigo re-entered the Siraidai, he was met by another blast from the past, or future in his case. Kyokaku was walking up to him. She looked different than how he was used to. She had shorter black hair that stopped at her shoulders and she still had her right arm. She went up to him and bowed, much to Ichigo's surprise. He would never think that she would ever show respect to anyone. "Captain Ko," she started as she rose her head to look up at him. "The head of the Shiba has invited you to a little party at our clan's house. He would very much appreciate it if you attended, Captain." This could be a problem. Ichigo had made it his life objective now not to get too involved with his father. He never talked to him other than a few brief greetings during meetings. Now that he was being invited to a party by the very man he would rather not get involved with now was inviting him to a small party, what exactly could he do now? With a sigh that caught Kyokaku's attention, Ichigo looked her in the eyes and asked. "When does it start and how do I find the house?" Kyokaku smiled at that and answered him. "It starts in about 10 minutes actually." Ichigo looked at her in surprise as she grabbed his hand and pulled him. "I'll show ya where our clan house is." Ichigo didn't have a choice in this matter, so he just let it happen. He was pulled along for quite some time before Kyokaku stopped in front of a large gate with the words Shiba on it. Ichigo wasn't surprised at the large and ridiculously large banner. He was used to it when he first met Kyokaku before. "Here we are, Captain. Welcome to the Shiba clan house." She opened the door and Ichigo immediately smelled the vast amount of food that was being served right now. The various scents was heavy on his nose as he saw the large table covered in food along with the various amounts of people all standing around and talking to each other. They all had some very excited looks to their faces as they went over and started to tear apart the food and lay out large amounts of sake all around the place. Kyokaku tapped Ichigo on the shoulder to get his attention and pointed over to a table over by a wall that had Hine, Ganju, Kisuke, and another man that looked almost like Ichigo only with black hair. "There they are right there." She had to yell because of the noise happening around her. Ichigo nodded and decided to make his way over. While he was walking, he was drawing a lot of attention to himself because of his hair and height. He was the tallest person there, that was no doubt, but the orange hair was a dead giveaway. The men on the grounds had shown him some respect and pats on the back for attending, while the women had tried to get closer to him to cop a feel at his toned body. Even the little kids found him interesting. His hair was what was drawing them to him. After a while of trying to get to the table and being stopped at every turn, Ichigo just decided to flash over to the table. He sat down and took a deep sigh as he looked at Hine. "You know, the girl you sent told me it was a little party," Ichigo said to him. Both Hine, Ganju, and the other guy laughed while Kisuke simply smiled. "Technically this is a small party, Captain." Hine started as he poured Ichigo a cup of sake. "There's usually way more people here than this." Ichigo smirked a little at his words and took the sake cup. He downed it with no problem. For the past 50 years Ichigo had started to drink sake whenever he had any downtime. It helped calm his nerves when he was feeling stressed running his squad. "So," Ichigo started. "Why exactly did you invite me, Captain Shiba?" "Please, you're in my house, Captain," Hine said as he poured more sake for Ichigo. "You can just call me Hine." "Alright then Hine. Then you can just call me Ichigo," Ichigo said to him. "Is that alright if we also call you that, Captain?" the other guy asked. "That depends." Ichigo started. "What's your name?" "Kyan Shiba, Lieutenant of Squad 13. he said with a bow. Ichigo remembered this guy. Rukia said that he was her mentor and she had to kill him. So no wonder she was so cold when she stabbed Ichigo, she's had practice stabbing a friend before. "Well, since I'm in your home, then I guess it's alright. Ichigo said as he unclipped his Zanpakuto from his belt and leaned it on the table. He now had a genuine smile that surprised both Kisuke and Ishine. Well, if that's the case. Kyokaku started as she flung her arm around Ichigo and handed him a larger cup of sake. Drinks on us, Ichigo. Ichigo shook his head but took the cup anyway and downed the sake easily. Everyone was surprised that he was able to drink so easily without the least bit of effects. Kisuke nudged Ishine's foot to get his attention. Kisuke motioned over to the orange-haired captain and Ishine nodded in response. So Ichigo. He started, getting his attention. You don't really like to talk to people all too much, mind telling us why? Ichigo could tell where this was going and sighed as he saw that all eyes were on him, even Kyokaku took a seat to listen in. Let me guess, you're finally just going to ask me like I've been saying for the past few weeks now? He asked as he crossed his arms. Yeah. More or less. Ishine said bluntly. With another sigh, Ichigo leaned back in his chair and answered them without revealing too much. I'm not really what you'd call a people person. Yet you seem pretty comfortable when you talk to people like Sosuke Aizen, Jin Ichimaru, and even that SWAFON girl. Kisuke started. I'd say you're pretty much a people person to certain people. I can see potential in them. Ichigo said quickly enough to stop Kisuke's analysis but not fast enough to draw suspicion. They have potential, and I want them to get stronger so that one day I can really test them. It's more of pride thing than what y'all think it is. And who taught you something like that? Kyokaku asked with a grin as she downed a cup. My father. So your old man is a man of pride, huh? Ishine asked. I like him already. Where exactly is your family anyway? That was when Ichigo's smirk went away. He looked down to the table for a bit and everyone else could tell that that was a touchy subject. With a sigh, Ichigo leaned forward and answered him. He's gone now. Same with the rest of my family. That was when Kisuke and Ishine could tell that if they pressed on just right, then they might understand Ichigo a little more. What happened to them if you don't mind me asking? Ishine started. Ichigo looked up at him then to the rest of the table. My mother died protecting me from a hollow. That wasn't a lie, but now it was time to lie about the rest. My father hunted it down and never came back, so I was left to protect my younger sisters. One day when I was out picking fruit, I felt my father's presence but it was different. I went back home and saw that he killed them. There were gasps from the five at the table as Ichigo continued. When I saw that, something in me snapped. I saw that the man in front of me wasn't my father. Just an empty shell possessed by a hollow, and I killed him. That's why you were interested in the hollow today? Kisuke said in a subtle tone. You wanted revenge? Pretty much, and I got it today. Ichigo finished as he leaned back into the chair. So now that you did, at least your family can rest easier now. Kyokaku said to him with a smile of her own. Ichigo smirked to her then looked down at the table. Yeah, I guess they can now. He stood up and took his Zanpakuto. Thanks for the drinks, Ishine, but now I really need to rest. I hope you understand. Of course. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. Ishine said with his own goofy grin. We will. Ichigo said to him with a grin of his own. He flashed out of the clan house and made his way back to his squad barracks. The lie that he told should keep them off of him for now at least, but he could tell that Kisuke was a little skeptical. That could be a little problem, but for now, he needed to see something real quick. Getting to his barracks, Ichigo went to his room and placed a barrier around it so nobody could get in. He's done this before and it usually meant he was asleep to his other squad members and didn't want to be disturbed. When the barrier was up, Ichigo opened a Garganta and went in it. After a short time he made it to the sands of Hueco Mundo where a massive battle was taking place. He looked over from a hill and saw the small snake hollow he freed only a few minutes ago fighting against a very familiar blue-eyed panther. Ichigo smirked at this and decided that it would be best to get involved. He released a massive amount of his energy that stopped the two dead in their tracks and flashed down to them. The boy looked at him in fear, while the panther looked at him with a feral grin. This is gonna fun. He said right before he charged at a new adversary. Check the description for the links to the author.